Hello and welcome to the second episode of the BSSO podcast. My name is Greg Robbins, and I'm joined by my co-host Will Weissert, and we're very excited to share our special guest for this week, Dr. Stephen Campbell. So, Dr. Campbell.
It's going to be Stephen for the rest of the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. We're going informal. I
Yeah.
like it. So I think the people are all dying to know a little bit more about what makes you the person you are and how you came to be Dr. Stephen Campbell.
Who are these people?
The public, they want to know.
The general
they
public.
want to know.
Sure. Okay. Well, you may ask me anything you like. What would you like to know?
So what was it like for you growing up? How did you get into music? What inspired you to become a teacher?
Okay. Well, sure. There was never like what led me to music was, I guess part of it is I grew up in church where there was significant music component, just sort of singing and singing in the church choir and so forth. But initially, when you got to the end of your fifth grade year, and you were about to start middle school, then you had to make a decision. You either had to play in the band, you had to sing in the chorus, or you had to do theater arts, I think. There may have been a visual art option, but I don't remember that. But I think singing in the chorus I was not terribly interested in that, and theater arts was simply not an option that I was going to consider. So it became joining the band. And so basically what everybody had to do was at a certain point at the end of your fifth grade year, you had to go have a meeting with the middle school band director and have a conversation, and then they would put you on. You would decide what musical instrument you're going to play. And there wasn't like some, magical moment like, Harry Potter and the Ollivanders where, it like lights up. I walked in and the band director said, "We need trumpets. You're playing trumpet." I said, "Okay."
Right.
And that was it. So I remember my dad, we told him what I was going to play. And so keep in mind, nobody from my family was musically inclined, played a musical instrument, sang, or anything like that. So we, and that's going to end up being sort of a recurring theme. So we had no idea what we were doing. And so we went to the local pawn shop, and they had two trumpets there. They had a gold one and a silver one, and the silver one was cheaper, so that's the one we got, and my dad bought, and that was it. So it was just the mouthpiece that was in the case, and then this instrument, and away we went. I don't even think it had a brand. It was just a silver trumpet. So and so he immediately signed me up for private lessons the summer before I started beginner band. And a lot of us were that way. A lot of us, this is in Texas, by the way. This is just in the Dallas Metroplex. And several of the people that in the sixth grade band that when we started, several of us had already had private lessons that summer when we showed up. So we could already play some things. We could already play some scales, and so it went pretty quickly. So that's how the trumpet of it all happened, and that ended up being an important thing because the other thing for me was I'm also the first person in my family to have attended college, to go to college at all, and that sort of came as a surprise. I think the reason I mentioned that is because I was not a good student in high school, certainly. That wasn't really an expectation. The expectation was pass your classes and then just go get a job somewhere. My dad passed away 10 or so years ago, 27th of January, and he drove a big truck, and then later he was on the road a lot, but then later he drove a forklift for the same company, but just rather than driving the big truck, he just, stayed in town and did that. And my mom did some sort of like clerical sort of data entry, jobs. So there wasn't necessarily this expectation that I was going to do anything differently than that. So, like I said, the basic expectation was simply to pass all of the classes, and of course you had to do that. I think that's a similar situation now, and in that you have to pass all your classes to play in the band and play in the orchestra and to do those kinds of activities. So my sole motivation to get at least decent marks was so that I could continue to do that. And I was studied for quite a few years in middle school and high school with my private teacher, whose name was Woody Yenny, and he went to the New England Conservatory, and he was probably the he played in several of the local orchestras in the Dallas area at the time, which there are several, and very good ensembles. And I think he said at a certain point, he said, you really ought to go play an audition for my friend Gary, who taught trumpet at Stephen F. Austin State University. Of course, I auditioned at a few other universities and so forth, but it was an interesting situation because my grades were not good enough to get into those schools. So if you were just looking at it from just the rap sheet, the transcript and so forth, my grades, they were not good enough to get into any of those schools. But I thankfully I could play, and I think I don't remember exactly, but I think my college audition was like a concerto that I had learned on, I think the Telemann that I learned on the piccolo trumpet, and then also one, on just, B-flat trumpet. And, when other people were trying to play real parts on Dante and Allegro or something. So I don't know what they did, but they worked it out so that I got a music scholarship, and I got, I also got into the University of North Texas, but I didn't know those people, and I knew Gary, who taught at Stephen F. Austin State University, and they offered me a scholarship. So because of that personal connection and the money, that seemed to be a better fit for me at the time. So I did end up going there, but like as I mentioned previously, and if this is not the direction you want me to go, then you need to stop, because you just point me in the right direction and I'm going to go.
This is great. We love the Stephen lore, so
yeah,
keep it going.
You're the only ones.
I'll just say it's interesting what you mentioned about music kind of opening doors academically. I was in a similar situation. My grades were not exceptional. They weren't terrible, but I knew I wasn't going to be getting into a lot of the schools that my classmates were getting into. And then one day I was leaving my piano lesson, and my teacher said, Greg, if you played the double bass, if you played the upright bass, you could get a scholarship anywhere. And I thought, why don't I look into the double bass? Mm-hmm. And that really did open doors. It focused me for the rest of high school and allowed me to have some options that I certainly wouldn't have had if I didn't have those musical people advocating for me.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it just takes a suggestion from somebody, and it seems to work, Yeah. But I did end up going to Stephen F. Austin State University, and I did a major in music education, which I think is probably the most important major that someone could have at the undergraduate level in music. And I also doubled in performance, but my teacher, Gary Wirtz, who is now, he would later become the director of the school, and then now he's the dean of the college. He's extremely a wonderful person, very organized, very driven, a very passionate advocate for students and for the arts, and he was great. And I don't remember what I was saying. I started talking about Gary. Well, anyway, I did end up going to school there and to study with him. And oh, I remember what I was going to say. Um, he would not let someone simply major in performance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was his rule in the studio that if you were going to, you could major in performance, but you also had to do a degree in music education, which I think is the right decision. Some people are vehemently opposed to that, and that's fine. One thing that I think is important to know, we all have kind of different ideas about that, and we should have different ideas about things. We don't want to be robots. So if someone feels as an applied teacher that you want to allow people to only do a degree in performance and not do the education thing, also that's your right. I mean, you have a right to feel that way, but I think his decision was the right one. And so anyway, I did all that business of interning and student teaching and getting certified and going through the licensure process, and I really enjoyed it. Um, but but going to similarly to being the first person in my family to have been a musician, I was also first person to go to attend the college, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I had no one to sort of say, well, hey, here's what you ought to be doing. Um, I didn't know how to study. I I was fairly organized, so I had that going for me. But see, I never read a book until I was a junior in college. Never.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one exception may have been like The Castle in the Attic or something, some of these, which is, but nothing of,
How did you pass English without
well,
reading a book?
I'll tell you, I found the section, I hope well, maybe I shouldn't be saying this on the podcast, but uh, I found the section in the library where there were essays about the books that we had to read.
Mm.
And so I just used those as a guide and, and wrote you did what I needed to do. But I also feel like it would have been weird. Reading a book was not an expectation in my family unit. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody would have come around the corner and saw me reading the book, they probably would have put me in an institution or something. They would have made fun of me or said,
Yeah.
oh, hey, get a load of the professor over here.
Oh yeah.
That just wasn't, built-in reading time. That wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't be until, like I said, until I was I think a junior in college that I finally, like honest to goodness, actually read a book, and it was The Red Pony by John Steinbeck, because we were playing the Red Pony Suite by Aaron Copland in the orchestra, the school orchestra at the time, and so I read that book, and I thought, like, wow, what a tremendous author. I mean, even that, I really enjoyed reading that book, and then I remember his book East of Eden was on a reading list, and I think I just saw it randomly, so I grabbed it, and I loved it. I couldn't put it down, and I remember we got to the end of that book, and I cried like an idiot. I thought, oh my gosh, and so at that point, it became an obsession with John Steinbeck. I just read everything, like I would go to the secondhand shops and get those books, and go to the library and everything. So I think I have even now somewhere everything he wrote. Screenplays, and I just thought he was. I was biased because he was the only author I knew at the time. So, but he was my favorite. But
I
anyway,
was also obsessed with John Steinbeck,
yeah.
and I also had the same experience reading East of Eden. I was bawling. Yeah, I love all his work except for The Pearl, though.
The
I had to read that in high school, and I hated it.
Well, that's okay. I mean, like any composer, we'll have, pieces that we like and then pieces that we're going to avoid, I mean, like Beethoven, great composer. I had to suffer through his triple concerto like 12 years ago, and I'm still not over it. If I never play that piece again, it'll be too soon. But some people seem to really like it. So, but like I said, it should be that way. We don't need to be robots. We don't need to like something just because our teacher liked it, or because, it's fine. But now I try to read as much as I can, and I mean I just really stopped watching TV altogether. In fact, I didn't even have a TV for the longest time. But and I remember some of the crucial moments. Um, I remember struggling in as an undergraduate with for the first couple of years with getting decent grades in the general studies classes and certainly in music history. I think in all the history of the world, at a university, one thing that has always been an issue is parking on a university campus. But I'll tell you, if you get to campus when I do, if you get here at 6:50 in the morning, you will have no problem finding a parking spot. But if you are trying to get here at 9:30 in the morning or 10 or 11, yeah, there's going to be problems, finding a parking spot, of course. Um,
Why
Music
don't you try
history.
biking to work?
Well, so, I mean,
I hear
I
all the
do.
cool professors are doing that.
Yeah, I know I do sometimes, but if I have my trumpets, I don't want to ride with my
Makes
bike with
sense.
with those on my back. So, depending on the weather, and I am not going to be that dotty old fool professor that shows up to class dripping with sweat or in rain, got rained on or
Hmm.
or something like that. That's just the little tidbit that those students need to to say something. I give them enough fodder as it is, just being me. But but also, the issue of music history. Undergraduate students, always want to complain that that's such a hard class. It's not a hard class. You just have to study for it like you study everything else.
Hmm.
And if you do the reading and you make and you do what you're supposed to do, then there's no such thing. It's not easy or hard. You can just do it or you can't. If you did the reading and you made an outline about the reading, you're going to be able to participate in the class and you're going to be able to satisfy the test. If you didn't do the reading, you're not going to be able to. It's as simple as that. You can either do it or you can't. If you did the work, you'll be able to pass the class. Nobody has to worry about getting an A. You just have to worry about, or not worry, you just have to concentrate on learning the material because getting an A in the class is a byproduct of having learned the material. So if you don't learn the material, you won't get an A. It's as
Yeah.
simple as that. There's an old expression an old text expression that goes, what you're trying to do is make a racehorse out of a jackass. Just if you learn the material, you'll be fine. So, but anyway, try telling me that when I was, my first couple of years in college, I didn't know what I was doing.
Hmm.
And a lot of the teachers would say, look, you're going to have to study. Okay, that's fine, but I don't know how to do that. And it wasn't until I just had, similar to your bass conversation, I just remember one of a guy called John Goodall who taught um, oboe and music theory at Stephen F. Austin State University. I think we may have been in an elevator together or something, and he said, well, it's just really if you just do the reading and then you make an outline as you read along, that'll really help. And I thought, oh, well, that seems like. And then I had all A's all the time because like someone finally gave me some direction and figured
Hmm.
and I sort of knew then what I was what I was supposed to do. So anyway, that really helped a lot. And then another really big deal was I played in a sort of a regional orchestra at the time in that area called the Orchestra of the Pines. And I ended up being the what they call the co-principal trumpet because my teacher, Gary Wirtz, was the principal. So I sat right next to him and played. We played some big rep, and that was very influential. And it is so much fun. That's my favorite thing to do is sit in the back, sit in the back of the orchestra, and nothing is better than the orchestral crescendo. It's like that's
Hmm.
one of the best things, when you have these arrival moments, and it's there's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it, and so that I think more than anything else, having those experiences made me want to, keep going, keep having these experiences, and really continue to be a musician.
Hmm.
Um, what else do you want to know?
Well, Will, as a student, have you been in a situation in college where you felt like you were forced to learn something, and then it was like, okay, well, I am coming to school, I should be open to new things, or is it, or for you, is it a mindset of, I have these things I'm interested in, and if there's something I'm really not interested in, I'm just going to kind of um, ignore it or spend less time on it, and have you changed your approach in your time here?
I think, especially coming to college, it was kind of like, because I came from a really small town, really small high school. We didn't have like a music theory class. We didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
very strong cement music program. And so I got here and whoa, music theory, whoa, music history, sight singing, completely new concept for me there. And I kind of treated it as like I'm here for trombone, MMP. It's what I enjoy doing. It's kind of what route I want to go in my life. But I feel like all those classes are kind of byproducts of that specifically. I think knowing all of that and putting effort into all those classes kind of makes the final product a little more satisfying. That's kind of the mindset that I have going into it, because I feel like, especially performing and uh, maybe teaching one day, I think knowing all of that stuff will give a lot more insight onto like why and how I'm doing what I'm doing. But yeah.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen, you mentioned your first sort of rite of passage playing with your teacher in the professional ensemble. Could you talk a little bit about the ensembles you work with these days?
Sure. So I'm since 2012 or 2013, I've been the principal trumpet of the Lexington Philharmonic Orchestra, and that's in Lexington, Kentucky. And also, about the same time, I won third/assistant principal of the West Virginia Symphony Orchestra, which is in Charleston, West Virginia. And then the right before COVID, that's kind of a weird situation, because I had been a sub in that orchestra for um, a couple of years, and then they had the audition for third. Blind. All these auditions are blind, and just for your, I don't know how many people listen or watch these episodes, but
Thousands, tens
yeah,
of thousands.
a blind audition simply means that there's a curtain between the person auditioning and the committee evaluating the individual auditioning. And so they don't know who you are, and you can't see them either. And on either side of the curtain, like on one side is going to be the typically the personnel manager for the orchestra. On the other side is going to be the union steward. So they can see the person auditioning and the panel, because they're on the ends, but the committee and the person auditioning can't see each other. I don't know if that makes any sense. So that way
Yeah.
they can certify that this was a fair, um, uh, there wasn't any like secret messages going on at the same time, and also that the individuals who were auditioning had a fair hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when I won that job in Charleston, um, it was for third/assistant, and then we only ever played officially one concert as a section, because the guy who was playing second trumpet moved to Japan. So then at the same time, that ensemble had a hiring freeze. So I moved up to second/associate, and I played that job for the next 7 years. Then they had an audition for it. And so then I had to like play another audition to keep doing the job that I was. Well, I could have gone back to third, um, and I just sort of, at first it weirded me out a little bit to have to do that, but that was pride, and that's really not going to do anybody any good. So I thought, well, hell with it. I'll just um, play the audition, and the worst thing they'll say is no, and Lord knows I've heard that before.
Yeah.
So, but I did win. That was another blind, audition. So. Um, and that worked out well, because um, the guy who that would have been the runner up, his name is Micah, is also a tremendous musician and player, and wonderful person. Came in as third. So got a pretty good um, we've got a pretty good team out there. So anyway, those are both really excellent organizations. And the West Virginia Symphony Orchestra we actually are the West Virginia Symphony Orchestra, because we don't just stay in Charleston. We take this act on the road. So will be in a few cities in the state, and a lot of those cities, otherwise they wouldn't have access to a serious musical arts organization. And we also do a lot of outreach concerts with the brass quintet, and not just brass quintet, but some other sort of inventive um, instrumentation ensembles. So
Yeah.
I'll say that before I moved to the Midwest, I was unaware, or I should say that when earlier in my career, I wasn't prepared with the huge number of professional, semi-professional, and regional orchestras that are in the Midwest, the Southwest, and the South. Uh, it's just an amazing constellation of musical arts organizations that share this music all over the place, and there's a lot of work out there, I think, for orchestral-minded people who uh, don't shouldn't feel like the need to they shouldn't feel like they need to move to New York City or to Europe to play in an orchestral setting.
yeah, if it depends on how. I mean, and we could say this with anything. I mean, one of the things that I ask the students here a lot is, um, so for instance, you wanted you're a music media production major as
Mm-hmm.
well. Okay, so what do you want to do at this
I'm
point?
At this point, I think I want to go into. So my track right now is commercial music design. So just something along that path. I don't have it pinpointed yet, but I
But what
still
does
have
that mean?
time.
Like, what does that look like for you?
uh, Maybe more along the lines of composition, and just working in both digital landscapes and maybe orchestral landscapes to just create more rather than perform.
So, I mean, so the question that I would ask to anyone would be, so does every studio, does every orchestra, does every musical arts ensemble, does every school, does every civic theater in 100 miles of here, do they know your name?
Mm-mm.
Well, then you're not going to get called. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's not just going to magically happen. You have to, reach out. And I mean, it would
Oh
probably
yeah.
take you an hour because you just have a quick 3 sentence email letting these people know who you are and that you're available to provide your services in some way.
Yeah.
But they won't call you if they don't know you exist. It's not that they have something against you.
Oh
They
yeah.
just don't know you exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course, then once you could probably send 300 emails and maybe two people write you back.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only going to take you a couple of hours work.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good return on your investment considering sending an email is free.
Mm-hmm.
Does this make any sense?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, when it comes to performing, teaching, uh, recording, um, that's one thing that a lot of the um, high school bands, whether it's a marching band or the track band or the concert band, the jazz band, the orchestra, the choir, um, they want their programs recorded by somebody who knows how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were doing it right now, I mean, you better believe everybody would know. Every school, they would be like, yeah, this Campbell guy keeps emailing us,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, the worst they'll do is ignore you or say no. And
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, that's Lord knows that's happened plenty of times before. It's going to happen
Oh
plenty of
yeah.
times still. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no big deal. It's not fatal. So that's one of the best things that we can do. Um, is, I mean, you want to, especially at a place like Ball State University or any university. I mean, this is a place of higher learning. It's not an institution of the same learning, and it's certainly not an institute of lower learning.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's important to follow your teacher's instructions, and there's a reason that you have to study music history. There's a reason you have to study music theory. I mean, you can't get a
Mm-hmm.
degree in music if you don't know a damn thing about music. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Um, and so I mean, it's important for context. But then the other important thing, and to be invested in what's happening at the school, and to be creative and do kind of what you're doing right now. But then also take what you're doing and try that without supervision.
Mm-hmm.
because you kind of have a safety net, here in this setup.
Yeah.
But one thing to
You mean
sort of
like taking risks?
taking calculated risks. I mean, don't do anything stupid,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, look around this room right now. Seriously, look around the room.
Mm-hmm.
This is a pretty nice setup.
Oh yeah.
Most places don't have this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can tell you right now, and I'm not trying to say anything, but you can go. I won't even say the name of the place, but there's a music store not far from here. Have you seen their recording studios? Yeah, well, they're not
Mm-hmm.
like this.
Yeah.
There's like plywood,
Yep.
and things. So this is a pretty safe environment. I mean, you have all this equipment, and there are some people, I don't even know who those people are in that booth in there, listening in. So you've got people to kind of do this for you.
Mm-hmm.
But now if you're going to go off and do this on your own, you've got to do all this stuff yourself, and you're going to learn a lot doing that.
Yeah.
So whether that's doing this or maybe like organizing a brass quintet to go, kind of, you're going to learn a lot that way because
Mm-hmm.
everybody thinks, not everybody, but a lot of people think they sort of see some of what I do specifically with the orchestras that, they see us in our little suits and,
Mm-hmm.
and they see the glamour. They say, oh, that must, and I've even heard people say that must be so glamorous. It's not. It's, or they say, oh, that must be so much fun. Okay, we don't get paid to have fun. Now, I really enjoy doing it. I can't really imagine myself not being a musician.
Yeah.
But, what the audience sees is a concert that lasts for a couple of hours. If they don't see the days and weeks that, we were in the practice room, shedding these licks
Mm-hmm.
and first of all, you have to just win the job. I mean, that's like that's a serious time commitment too. And they don't see going on the outreach concerts and all the funny business that happens, when you do those things, the interacting with the public. And a lot of people don't know that like somebody has to write this music.
Mm-hmm.
They think we just make it up as we go along. So, uh, so you'll learn a lot doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you'll kind of figure out or start to figure out what works, what maybe doesn't work quite as well, and then, come up with like a little bit of a better plan. But,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of hard, and you can see what year are you?
Sophomore.
Sophomore. So,
Mm-hmm.
you probably see the people, your peers on campus that want to play it safe and sort of like stay in the Ball State bubble,
Mm-hmm.
and they're living in the land of illusion. And they, and then, but very soon that, that, um, the truth will be revealed,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes they don't like that. They don't like what they see.
Yeah.
So kind of going out there and taking a risk, doing something unsupervised will help with your perspective because, like I said, it's real easy to, for you all to like swipe in here and have these studios with, everything you could possibly want.
Yeah.
Go in here to the Ableton studio, like this is amazing, this
Mm-hmm.
place. So I don't know how I started talking about that, but there we are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can just kind of have some, a couple of minutes of funny business and then wrap it up. I think okay, so Okay, Stephen, I've got some questions from the community here. The first one is, what are some of your favorite ways that you've been involved in Ball State's community and the community around it, like Muncie and the surrounding areas?
Sure. Well, I think one of the being involved in the Ball State community is I think I have a pretty good friend group. And, for instance, with Keys or well, Kara Chowning, Dr. Chowning, I call her Keys because she plays the piano. Um,
What do you call me then?
you don't want to know.
Okay.
Um, uh, we've worked on several projects together, and it's kind of fun because one or the other of us will say like, "Hey, can you do this?" Yeah, okay, we'll do it. Wait, what are we doing again? Like, it doesn't matter if the other one's doing it. That's fine. We'll. Um, I'm never worried about um, going on stage if she's there. Some of the committee work that I've been involved in has been very rewarding. I like one of the cool things about being a musician, particularly um, in kind of more of a freelance situation, is that you have to come up with like kind of creative ways to deal with things. You never know what you're walking into. And so I think that's one of the most fun and interesting things as a faculty member is when you're serving with a group of people and you've got to come up with a solution to something, or you're working on a project and the question is, okay, how are we going to do this? And it's always that's one of my favorite things to do. You show up to a gig and they say, oh well, how are we going to cover all these parts? Okay, well here's what we're going to do, and you come up with a game plan. Or when we, in some of this committee work, okay, how are we going to do? Okay, then the creative juices start flowing, and then you come up with a solution, and then that's exciting to me. Coming up with some of our trumpet ensemble programs is that's another cool thing that I like to do, because whenever I sit down to write the charts, I write the charts with the specific players in mind. So kind of taking these works that are typically for large orchestra and then kind of sussing it all out and figure out, okay, how are we going to make this work? And some of the collaborative things that we've done with dancers and actors and so forth. It's okay, how can we do this? What's going to be the next thing? And that sort of creative spirit is something that I just enjoy doing. And then occasionally the students, there will be a student here or there that they really become inspired to get involved and to further that, or they just occasionally there will be a student who just really digs it, so yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, our next question's coming in from Twitch. Trumpet Lover 47 says, can you talk a little bit about the ensembles you're involved in at Ball State, and perhaps a little bit about trumpet ensemble?
Well, trumpet ensemble is the only ensemble that I have anything to do with. I mean, you've invited me to perform with the orchestra, previously, but we don't. That's pretty much as far as what my role here is. Applied trumpet, and then with that we have the trumpet ensemble that I consider to be curricular. I consider that to be part of the curriculum. For a variety of reasons. And so we have a concert coming up next week. We feature, it's a pretty diverse program because we're playing Lincoln Portrait by Aaron Copland. We're doing the big scene where Rodimus gets the sword from the end of Act 1 of Aida. And we're also doing this antiphon by Hildegard von Bingen that we used to do with Marie all the time.
Who is Hildegard von Bingen?
Well, she was 12th century, I think. One of the, if not the first recorded composers who was a woman. This area of music history is not a particular interest of mine, but there's this antiphon that's like pretty cool that we have from her, and so I set it for for trumpet ensemble and percussion, and it goes into this sort of medieval dance-like uh, uh, situation. So it's a pretty cool
And
deal.
where and when is that concert?
Well, the actual concert is on April the 7th in Sursa Performance Hall here in Ball State University at 7:30 in the evening. But we're also taking the show on the road before that, so we'll be at East Elementary School in Pendleton on the 4th, and the Westminster Village here in Muncie on the 5th. And then we have the evening of the 6th to kind of get our act together again, and then the concert on the 7th. But we also have one of the students, Chase Wampler, who is a trumpet student. He's a junior. I've been talking about doing this a silent film for a while, and I've just been kind of talking about it. And he said, "So are we going to do this or not?" And I said, "Oh, okay. I guess we're doing this."
Yeah.
So we're going to do a silent film. Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, and so Chase actually wrote most of the arrangements himself. I did one just because I wanted to participate, and but he did all of them, and then he also did what we're going to open the concert with is the main title from The Seahawk, which is a film starring Errol Flynn, but the film score was by Eric Korngold, and who was predecessor to John Williams, essentially. So if you listen to his film scores, you can draw direct lines, to what you're hearing from John Williams, and it's really exciting stuff. And so Chase is one of those students who, for whatever reason, we started doing this. He was very inspired to start writing, arrangements and transcriptions, and so we featured his transcriptions and arrangements on a few of our programs, actually. So. And that's going to be great for, any student who wants to get involved in something like that. That's especially if they're really, it doesn't really matter what area of music you're in, but particularly, music education, because if you show up to a school and they don't have the music you need, you're going to have to figure something out. So you better learn how to write it. Or if that's what you want to do in like composition and stuff, well, you got to figure it out, and,
Yeah.
and studying these scores. I study scores in a different way than you might study the scores. But I study it in seeing trying to find out how these composers achieved the feelings and the, what they were going for, and how I can relate that to trumpet ensemble. And one of the goals, I have a few goals, but mainly just to make sure that this music is in the perspective of some of these students, right? So like last semester, we did, pictures at an exhibition. That's a cool piece. But it has 3 trumpets. So if you are one of the 3 trumpets that gets to be in the orchestra, that the year they happen to be doing that piece, then you get to play it. But if you don't, you don't, unless you're in the trumpet ensemble. And then then you do get to participate in a meaningful way, because I try to make the parts look exactly the way they do in the score. We keep everything in exactly the same key. It's note for note, bar for bar, exactly the way it is. And a lot of times, unfortunately, the students, they don't have a personal relationship with the music because they just haven't had the occasion or the opportunity to perform it. And so for a lot of people who might say, like the uninformed, younger, people that join us here on campus, like that they don't like opera. Well, what's not to like? What do you mean you don't like opera? Get a life. I mean,
Yeah.
it's every good thing piled into one, deal. Now, there are some things that are better than others, of course, but again, it sort of comes down to personality. Like maybe you tend to gravitate more toward opera seria or something. I don't. I can't stand that music. But give me Puccini and Verdi and Wagner. Like that's my idea of what it's supposed to be. So, but I just want this music to be in their perspective. And a lot of times, the reason that it's like, why are you friends with somebody? Because you're there, like you're together. It's not because you have something in common. It's just because you are in the same class or whatever. So why do people like certain music? Because they grew up with it or they performed it, and they had that sort of relationship. So the more that music can be in the perspectives of the students, then the more that they can have an informed view. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Oh yeah. I guess just one last question. Do you have any pieces of advice for anyone that could be listening for maybe auditions or just general life advice from Dr. Campbell?
well, I think in terms of, I don't really do advice,
Mm-hmm.
but just some things to think about and just to consider would be, it really doesn't matter what you want to do. There are some things that are true about everything. So no matter what you're going to do, you need three things, I think. You need a purpose and you need a plan. If you don't have a purpose, it's going to be hard to be successful no matter what you do, because you just don't have any direction.
Yeah.
But once you have a purpose, so you mentioned an audition or something. Okay, well that's good, but then you have to have a plan to achieve that purpose, because it's not just going to happen by magic. Like again, you mentioned auditions. That's the reason I bring it up, but you could apply this to anything. But in terms of auditions, the auditions that I've, like for instance, when I showed up to Lexington to audition for that chair, there were over 50 other trumpet players. And this is the Lexington Philharmonic Orchestra. This is a part-time group. This is not a 52-week orchestra. For the West Virginia Symphony Orchestra, there were about 72 people that showed up for that deal. And there's only one chair available. It's not like they're going to hire a dozen of you and have you share it. There's just one person is going to win. And they all want to do that. So you have to have a purpose, but then you have to have a plan to achieve that purpose. And that's the second thing. The third thing is the most difficult, potentially. The third thing is you have to have the courage to act on the plan.
Yeah.
And what that means is, if you're serious about it, becoming a composer, becoming an audio engineer, becoming a professional musician, becoming a teacher, and being successful at all of those things, that's not just going to happen. That means that we have to make those things a priority.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that you can't ever have fun? No, that's ridiculous. Of course, you should go, screw around, with your friends and, cut up and carry on, and act a fool from time to time, but that should be the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
There's, and too many people try to do it the other way around. Like, hope is not a strategy. Okay. And when I say the courage to act on the plan, there's different types of courage, isn't there? There's the sort of like courage that is required to run into a burning building to get people out. But there's other types of courage. For example, moving forward and leaving home. One of the things, if anyone spent any time with me, I've kind of talked about this before, but it doesn't really matter what country you come from on this planet. One thing that we love as people is these epic tales. So I don't know if you think in terms of like Harry Potter or Star Wars or whatever. We love these, both John Williams scores, by the way. We love these stories about about the hero who, these Lord of the Rings, these big epic tales. And there's certain archetypes to all of those stories, but one of the things that they all have in common is that the protagonist, the hero of the story, has to leave home to go and to complete their mission, to fulfill this journey. In fact, I'm not a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings situation. I know I'm the minority in that, as I am on many things, and that's fine. But I do remember that there's in one of the films, I don't remember which one, probably the first one of the characters makes a point to say, if I take one more step, this is as far as I've ever been from home. And there's a reason. That's not an accident. There's a reason they say that. We see this in literature all the time. In the Odyssey, what happens when they come to the land of the lotus eaters? The people who eat the lotus plant, they can never leave the island. That is obviously a metaphor for the past. If you're holding on to the past, you can't move forward. And so you're going to stay there. So if someone's constantly living in the past, whatever that means to you, then you're never going to be able to, that's the courage that I'm talking about, to enact a plan to achieve your purpose. So if, again, you brought up, the concept of the winning an audition. Well, that's going to mean your fundamentals need to be on lockdown. You need to be, the purpose of the audition, okay, is to demonstrate that you are the person that needs to be sitting in that chair. The purpose of the audition is not to demonstrate that you have no idea what you're doing. You don't need an audition for that. Is this making any sense?
Oh, yeah.
So that means you've got to have the right sound, the right tone quality. That means you've got to play the music. There's one of my favorite trumpet players, Doug Lindsay of Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, says, play it the way that it goes, right? Generally speaking, this ain't a premiere. Just play it the way that it goes. So when you sit down at the audition, play it the way that it goes, or do your best. Nobody's perfect. So that would be my, I don't know if that makes any sense or if that's what you wanted to know, but I would say, kind of be thinking about this, have the purpose and have a plan, but have the courage to start the plan.
All right. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for
Sure.
joining us.
Yeah,
This
thanks.
has been fun. And thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we can't wait to see you in the next one.
Thank you all.